All right, I think we're live.
All right. So good morning, everybody. It's January the 7th. The slaughterhouse of failure is not in our destiny. We will persevere until we succeed. Augmandino modified. So today we're going to talk about leadership through detachment and observation. And Dan's picked out one of his, the people that he follows, Jocko Willink. We're going to talk a bit about what he says. And I'm also going to bring up something that I've been following here, which is build a leadership team for transformation, which looks something like that. And that's from the February this year. That's this one current Harvard Business Review. And there's some interesting pieces in there too that are useful for leadership. So, first of all, if we can maybe identify what is leadership, and it's leadership through detachment and observation. Learn, listen, appraise, detach, think out the box. What is the box? This is the evident. It's everything. It's the traditional way of doing things. So, the obvious thing with obvious logical sequence of thinking. And we've got to get out of that. We've got to think out of that box and be creative and think how we can actually achieve with the end in mind, but rethinking to keep up with the times and where we are today. So analyzing situations, circumstances, sit back, detach, mentally, physically, emotionally, and rethink. And this is what leaders do. You've got to inspire yourself. What would you do? How can you do it? How can you inspire your team? It's not always easy, to emotionally step out of something when we're almost into battle of where we are. So basically, that's what we're going to talk about.
Excellent. Thanks, Lawrence. So for those of you who don't know who Jocko Willink is, he's a retired U.S. Navy SEAL officer, and he's authored a couple of #1 best-selling books. One of them is Extreme Ownership. The other one is Leadership Tactics, Strategy and Tactics. Excellent books. He also has a couple of podcasts. One is called Leadership and Discipline, and then one for young leaders in training called Warrior Kid. And he also has a consulting business called Echelon Front for businesses. And what he does is he teaches combat leadership principles to help others build their own high performance winning teams, right? And so what he does is he teaches how to apply leadership lessons from the battlefield to bring extraordinary success in the workplace. And so when he talks about leadership, he says leadership is for everyone, right? It doesn't matter what you're doing, whether you have a leadership role. We're all leaders in some form or fashion in our lives. And so, a couple of his big teaching principles are that you need to detach yourself from the situation, because when you're intimately involved in a situation, you get emotional and it's hard to kind of think outside of what everybody's doing. And that's what he did on the battlefield and in training disciplines that they did. So you need to detach from your ego and detach from the results, detach from your emotion. You need to learn to listen and observe. Observation is another big one of his principles. And you can get a collective of ideas from diverse groups within your team. And then you need to take extreme ownership of your own success and the success of your team. And then also knowing that you are empowered to make great things happen and empowering others to do that. One of the things that he said that really stuck with me is that on the battlefield, the decisions that they make affect lives, but in the business world, the decisions that we make affect livelihoods, right? And so, we need to learn to step back from our businesses. Where is your business today? Look at what you did to grow last year. Look at what you're going to do to grow in the future. Look at where you are right now in this moment, not just your business, but personally, right? And then detach yourself from the emotion about how you feel, good or bad, where you are, where you were, where you're going, right? Where you headed, and take emotion out of it and think about what those simple decisions are that can help you get to where you want to be. So what simple things can you do to conquer your goals? Is it one more phone call when you're mentally tired or physically tired? Is it one more scanner placed? Is it 5 people a week on product? What are those goals? And then what is the simplest decision you can make to get yourself where you want to be? And then start looking at it from the team standpoint and the others that are on your team. What are the simplest decisions you can make and help your team make to get them for where they want to be? It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't have to be, something that's really difficult to understand. It needs to be simple so everybody can understand it from any walk of life, right? And then along with that is, are you soaking up as much information as you can? Are you doing things to grow as a person, as a business owner, as a leader? Another comment that Jocko Willink makes is that when you listen to somebody else, you automatically know 100% more. You know what they know, and you know what you know, right? So observing and detaching are very important characteristics of what successful leaders do.
Yeah, so the emotional part of any decision can actually distort your clear thinking. So the ideal thing is to think in a detached way. And what I like to say is think with your mind and act with your heart. So if you think with your mind, you've got a clear thinking. You've detached everything, you're thinking with your mind. And then the decision has to be made, you're using your mind, but then you've also got to put the heart into it, because that's where the team bonding comes, and where you can reach people more deeply. So, but it is about acting and taking decisions. Listen to people, make a decision, and then act. But acting from the mind, but also add your heart to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a big piece of it, right? Big piece of it's very difficult to take emotion and ego and detach that from what you're doing. So that's a skill in and of itself. But detachment is basically just separating the emotional from the rational, right? And allowing your mind to make those rational decisions rather than emotional ones, because emotional decisions aren't always rational decisions. And so how can we make that happen? Jocko actually offered some, what I think is great advice. He says, you have to learn to take a step back. He recommends doing it physically, so then you can detach from it mentally too, right? When you step away from it, you're able to detach physically and mentally, and then step back, look around so you can see what's actually happening and make a real decision based on logic and not emotions, right? So, being detached, what that does is it helps us make choices for the greater good, not from our own personal emotion. And then what Jocko says is that it helps you make decisions in the service of the mission, right? And that mission can be military. That decision can be in our daily personal businesses and the teams that we've built to help us in this business. So why, he also offers some information on, why does it feel so hard to decide and make a move? And one of the concepts that he talks about is that people make these decisions too difficult. They're not simple enough. And so, critical component of success at work is making smart decisions. Yet it's also one of the most common challenges, right? Getting stuck in that space where you need to make a decision, but you're worried about whether it's the right decision for where you want to go, right decision to reach your mission or reach your goals. And we always want a little bit more information to make that one more piece of data, another opinion from somebody else to make sure that we're making the right call, right? And so, we need to use the collectiveness and collaboration of our teams for a diversity of ideas to help us in that decision-making process while being detached and taking emotion out of it, thinking logically and rationally.
Yeah, that's why I always think about our teams as, or our team leaders rather, as our board of directors. And we have a board of directors. We sit around the table. Everybody expounds their ideas. Everybody, proposes whatever they've got. Everybody puts in their input. And the last one to speak, the first one to speak should be you as the leader, but he's asking questions. And the last one to speak is the conclusion, and it's a roundup of everybody's opinions. And so that's where I think we can have the best input, is if we engage by asking the questions, we listen, and then we come to a conclusion that may be not to everybody's liking, because we've detached from the emotion side. We've just used our minds in a cold way to think what is the best solution. And it may be in one of our board members not very much to his liking or her liking, but in the overall, that's the way we should go. And that's what the mind says. And then when you present it in a humble way, but also with bearing in mind, just have a heart about how you present it.
Absolutely. And Linda has a great comment in the chat there that, detaching mentally is a practice of mindfulness, right? Putting yourself 100% of your thoughts and attention on the task at hand. And I had a whole page or two on mindfulness, but we had to kind of limit what we were going to talk about today because there was so much to talk about. But thank you very much for bringing that up, Linda. I think that's a great comment that, this is essentially just being more mindful of where we're at, being more mindful, being more present in the moment. But it's also, about making the smallest possible decision that moves everyone, not just you, everyone in the direction that's the right one for the team, like Lawrence just said. So, these decision making can be terrifying. What if you fail? That's great. You can learn from failure. Look for the silver lining in every decision that you make, in every result that comes from that, every outcome, good or bad. We can learn something from any of those, from any of those situations. If it's a good decision or a bad decision, we can always learn from that. So choose one step to take in that decision. You don't have to carry out the whole entire decision-making tree and be 100% committed to that, because if you take that first step and it's not in the right direction, you can rewrite that ship and reset that compass to where you want to go. So, just for an example, if you want to build a store, start by sending a couple of people to study the feasibility of that particular area where you want to place that store. Then throw up a kiosk and see how it performs before you build the entire store. Proof of concept provides less risk.
Yeah. Proof of concept, and proof of concept also, on one of the things that Jacko says here is the 4 laws of combat inspire leadership. So one of them is embrace the power of teamwork and know the importance of showing care to everyone on the mission. So here I'd like to just tell a little story about some time ago. There is John Whitaker, who was an ex-Marine. He was telling the story that on one of the occasions they were up on a plane, and one of the officers came to him and said, "Colonel, would you check my parachute?" And that is a moment of doubt of that officer about his team. And Whitaker said, in his words, was something like, "Son," he always talk about son, do you not trust the work that your team does? And that is, I think, a show of leadership where you're actually putting your life in the hands of your team in that case, and where you believe in your team. So you've got to show leadership by saying, I trust my team because I train them. In fact, the question to that officer would have been also, Don't you believe in don't you believe in the work you've done by teaching your team? So that's one of the things that I think is also important, this embrace the teamwork and showing care to everyone on the mission.
Absolutely. I mean, at some point, leadership becomes more about or less about the decisions that you're making and more about the decisions that your team members are making, right? Because that's ultimately the goal, is to lead them and create leaders within the organization that can come up and be the next generation of leaders, right? I mean, that should be the ultimate goal. And the goal should be is that we're creating leaders that are better, stronger, more agile, able to be more mindful, able to step outside their comfort zone more than we were able to do, because that's where that success is going to come from. And, you know, one of the big concepts that he talked about is observation. And when you're a leader, you need to observe what your team's doing, how they're doing it, because they may be doing, you know, everybody in our particular business, we're using the same concepts, but the way we get those concepts across is a little bit different. And what works for me, it may not work for Lawrence, and what works for Lawrence may not work for Riley, you know, so, but we can all learn from each other by observing what they're doing, and how they're approaching the business, how they're talking about the business. And observing is just as important as listening. We talk about, you know, the ability to be able to listen rather than just talk. And there's the old saying that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and we should use them in that same proportion. The same thing goes for our eyes. We can observe just more than we can talk, right? And by observing and listening, we're going to learn a lot more from other people and about other people and about this business than we are just talking and telling people how to do this business, right? So observation is just as important as listening. And one of the things, the final things that I'd like to mention that Jocko talks about is being flexible, right? He encourages flexibility and open-minded and willingness to listen to the ideas of those around you, right? Ultimately, success isn't defined by the idea that came out of your head, but rather the quality of the collective ideas that you're able to harness by listening and observing those around you, right? So harnessing great ideas means hearing them, and then hearing them means being able to step back and observe how those ideas and how they're utilizing those ideas to be successful.
Yeah, and one of the things also that is putting into practice these observations and these appreciations of what we've heard, what we've seen, is to decentralize the command. Those are his words. But that, in our case, is the Ruby plan. So what do? We have led to a certain point, and then what the whole objective of our business is to create leaders and to create lots of leaders. And those leaders, we can give our own interpretation of how we've got to where we are, but we've also got to nourish the thinking of people that think different to what we do, but at least there's a system that we can follow, and they can add their own salt and pepper to that system. So the Ruby plan, I think, is essential, which is decentralizing the command, because that's the way the whole organization can grow. If we delegate and if we if we encourage people to use their own initiatives and their own thinking, which is very often different to what ours is. So long as we can guide in the right direction, but let people use their creativity in doing something that is possibly new. And this also comes to what I was talking about now, this Harvard thing, business review from this month. It's actually a very nice picture on it too. It's got, let me see if I can take this out here.
We can see it.
It's got a fish, a little black fish, and everybody else there. So there's the leader in there, going to try and lead the rest of them. He's going to build a team for transformation. And this is basically, where what we're trying to do. We're trying to keep up with the times. Things are changing every day, every week, every month. What the business is today and what it was 5 years ago is unrecognizable. We used to have, and I was talking to someone yesterday, my phone bill 15 years ago was $500 a month. Well, it's still $500 a month, except that $500 a month 15 years ago was a lot of money. Today, it's a drop in the bucket, but it's a much bigger organization. So we've evolved into a completely different business. We've now on digital, we've got Zoom, we've got all these other things that have evolved, and we've got to stay ahead of all that. We've got to stay ahead of the technology of where we are, so that we can inspire the teams that are busy in the day-to-day chugging around of just staying alive. And that's what leadership is to actually have some kind of a vision that we've reached a certain point, but we've got to strive for a much bigger distance, a big higher level, but bring everybody with us to where they can reach their full potential. And this is what makes it exciting, when we've got all the tools, but we've got to stay ahead of it. We've got to stay and see what's going on all the time. That's our job. Our job is to be fully engaged in new systems, new technology, in what's going to be happening in the next 5 years, 10 years, and start working towards that and bring our teams to do the same thing.
Yeah, and then that's where detachment comes in. Detach yourself from what's going on now, so you think about what's going to happen in the future. And so you can utilize detachment combined with observation to really increase your leadership skills. But one of the things that I think about when I think about detachment is, when we start to see greater success in our lives or in our business, and we reach these different levels, and we reach leadership levels or whatever, we tend to forget where we came from. And so sometimes we need to detach ourselves from that success, detach ourselves from that leadership role, and put yourself back in the trenches where other people on your team are at, right? And think about the challenges that they're facing, because their challenges are going to be different than your challenges, right? And think about, put yourself back in that situation, and just think about how you got where you are today, and how you're going to help those people that are on your team and an integral part of your team get to where they need to be, which is ultimately in a leadership role. And with that comes a higher success in the business. So, one of the concepts that Jocko always talks about is get some. He finishes all of his talks with get some. And what does get some mean? It just means, just like Nike says, just do it, right? Get out there and do what you need to do to be successful. And so his quote along what get some means is that he's going to take advantage of every second, of every minute, of every day, of every week, of every month, and of every year, right? He's going to go out and make things happen. He doesn't expect that anything is going to be given to him. I don't expect anyone to lay out a red carpet for me anywhere. I'm not expecting any of that stuff. Whatever I want in the world, I have to go and make it happen. I will not squander 1 second of this gift of life I've been given. I'm going to take advantage of every second. That's pretty powerful.
Nathan Rick said the other day on Monday, well, at least the recording was, I think if my memory serves, it was something like he has 700,000 hours or something like that of life. Looking at it from my point of view right now, I'm 75. So if I've got 10 more years to make it 85, with hopefully I'm still sound in mind and body. I know you're going to laugh, but okay, sound in mind and body. You're going to say I'm not even sound in that now. So that's okay, I understand. But 10 more years is only 120 months. It's 3,650 days. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's scary stuff. So you're quite right. Not don't waste any minute of every day of every hour of every day, and this is for everybody because I can tell you quite categorically, life is a speeding wave of time with crests and troughs, and it goes in. I can't remember from 50 to 70. It went like in 5 minutes. Holy moly! I just so it's up to us now to really fulfill our dreams, whatever they are, and to keep feeding that unlimited possibility that we have. And as leaders, it's to be able to help people attain whatever goals those people want to achieve. That's our role. That's what I feel my role is, to help people achieve their own full potential. And you just said, just like Nike, just do it. Don't overthink it.
All right, Lawrence. Well, it's almost 10 o'clock, so let's open it up to questions. I know we covered a lot of material today. I'm sure there's going to be some comments on what we've covered, so we'll open it up to questions. Any questions?
Comments?
Comments?
Not about my sanity, but comments?
We could go on all day about your sanity. We've only got a half an hour.
Okay, nothing going on. All right.
We've left them speechless for once, Lawrence.
I mean, I have something that's kind of tangential, but I think I think Lawrence was speaking about your board of directors. And, you know, that I can see how that dovetails well with Jocko, what he says, because they always talk about you need to get the information from as many sources as possible. The best decisions come from those that have the greatest levels of input. And so, you know, those two are congruent. But then, you know, the question is, maybe you could just help everyone that's listening today understand, how is it we define the board of directors? You know, where do they come from? You know, are they our team members? Are there people outside our business? And just, you know, because some people need to form their board of directors.
Brand reps.
Pardon?
Brand reps.
They're brand reps.
Those are your board of directors because they've started from being soldiers to being officers. And those are your first board of directors. Your first board of director is yourself. For yourself, you become a brand rep. And then you strive to getting 4 board of directors. So it makes you a Ruby. And that's where we start with a Ruby plan. That's where we start to escalate our business from you know, A to B. And the board of directors are those brand reps that have now achieved a certain level of competence in this business. And therefore, they've already had experience in some part of this, and we can listen to their stories and we're cognizant of their stories and how they got there and what their problems were. And that's where, in my opinion, is a board of directors. Dan, would you agree?
I agree with that. It's not that you can't have outside influences or people that you look to for help in that decision-making process, but the people who are going to help with the decision-making process of your business are those people that are intimately involved in the business, right?
Yeah.
So for me, you're absolutely correct, Lawrence. The people, the Ruby brand reps underneath me, or you know, that are an integral part of the team and an integral part of the decision-making process to where we are, where we're headed, and what we're going to do to get there.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks for the input.
So everybody, I want you to spend a little bit of time today, this weekend, the next week, you know, observing your business. Step outside your business. Be more mindful of what you have going on. Detach from everything emotionally, physically. See where you've been, where you are today, where you're headed, and take emotion out of that decision-making tree to make a more logical and rational decision of where you want to go, right? When we start to see success, we tend to pound our chests and think about how awesome we are and, you know, but that's emotional, that's all emotional, that's all ego. We need to let go of all of that stuff so that we can make rational, logical, sound decisions about our business, where we're headed, and leading those underneath us or that are part of our business, and taking their decisions and their experience into that decision-making process.
Right. I agree.
Awesome.
Good. Thank you. Thanks,
Thanks,
Dan.
everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, everybody, for being on
Thank
the
you,
call.
guys. Have a great day.
Thank you. Blessings. Thanks, Jim, for your input as well. Thanks,
Oh,
Dan.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye. Have a good
Great
weekend.
weekend.
Thank you.
Guys, that was really good.